That's the unifying
So
factor.
this is one of Gani's most hot take, in my opinion. So he wrote this article in the Diplomat, and I shared it in What is Up Indonesia, and I think a lot of our audience loved it. He basically said exactly that, like the pragmatic quid pro quo political system.
The client
Bagi-bagi
kue
is bad in its obvious reasons, but it's the secret sauce to our stability and unifying factor apparently. So would you say, this is such a hot take, would you say like the unifying factor for the elites now are corruption and clientelism, patronage?
Welcome back, Weeboos, to the self-proclaimed by me the most amazing podcast in Indonesia, Don't At Me. And I bet you miss us. We've been a long layover because of, Abigail's book launching. Yay! But we're here.
Yay!
We're here not to talk only about Abigail's book, which I will touch upon. I know you won't say, but I will touch upon. But we will also have a special guest here who has written his own book.
Yes.
Tak Perlu, Ratu Adil. Abigail, please introduce him.
Yeah, so here we have my friend and also somebody I really look up to in the field of politics and research, Edbert Gani.
Yay! Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for inviting.
Yes, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
So a little background, right? Okay. So Gani here is a researcher, and especially in the field of politics. Okay. And currently he's getting his Ph.D. with concentration on the topic of decentralization, right?
Okay.
And we're gonna talk more about that, of course. But fun fact, the first time I encountered Gani was actually back in, I think around 2020.
What?
I bet you don't remember. Of course he won't remember.
Oh, wow.
He's like,
this is interesting.
Okay, because like, fun fact, he's like a big shot in like the research
world.
academia world, right?
Got it.
So like he won't remember me.
Oh, wow.
But the first time I encountered him was I think 2020 or 2021.
Okay.
It was still during like lockdown where everything's like online and we did Zoom. And I think I was invited to like an FGD about IKN. So about like when Jakarta is still Ibu Kota, is still like the capital city, and then IKN. And then there's Gani. And so it was only like 5-6 people, and each of us supposed to like give our take about like this whole thing. Honestly, I don't know what I was doing there. But there was Gani. And dude, I kid you not, because usually when a lot of people talk, it's sometimes they just yap. You know how like they can say a lot of things, but nothing at the same time. Yeah. But when Gani spoke, I was like, who is this guy? Because he actually is the first person that's making sense in the room.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you.
And
Nobody have said that before.
You're the only one who's making sense. Yeah. And after that, so I followed him, and then apparently we have a lot of mutual friends, and read his book, Tak Perlu, Ratu Adil. And yeah, so very excited to talk about some very heavy topics today.
Wow.
And light topics. We're gonna go light topics.
Yeah.
Busy.
So to start us off, let's just say, okay, for those of you who don't know, or for those of you Weeboos who don't know, please introduce yourself, what you do, what are you doing right now?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, so again, name is Gani, but my family call me Edbert.
Edbert.
It's interestingly, my grandpa was like a professor in law back then.
Wow.
He was one of the founding fathers of Tarumanagara University.
Oh.
And when I knew about that, I feel like, maybe Gani is like a name that I should, use
Oh, wow. Okay.
in public, so I can, feel the presence of my grandpa, something like that. It's a bit personal, but that's
really
like
cool.
a quick recap of why I choose Gani. Because it's interesting, right? It's like a middle name.
Right.
Instead of just like,
Yeah.
I choose my middle name.
But that's so purposeful, right?
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm currently doing my PhD in political science at University of Toronto in Canada.
Okay.
I'm in my third year right now.
Right.
In the program, I take 2 subfields because we are required to take 2 subfields in our major in political science. So I choose comparative politics.
Comparative politics.
As my first subfield, and then public policy as my second subfield. Okay. And then I'm going to study this decentralization policy in Indonesia because I find it interesting because like if you follow Indonesian trajectory in policy making, I mean, like decentralization is like part of the bigger, discussion and debate, going on since even after our independence, right? We're always debating about, federalism, decentralization, the relationship between the central government and the local government. And I find it interesting because like nobody, I mean, like from Indonesia, like actually touch upon that kind of issue in politics because there's many scholars who actually talk about electoral politics, party politics, elections. Well, in my work at CSIS, as you probably have mentioned before, I work as a researcher at CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies. Well, in my role as a researcher, I have conducted a lot of researches about electoral politics, party politics, etc. Right? But I find like there's a gap in terms of another side of the coin, which is policy making and how politics operates in day-to-day decision making. And I choose decentralization because it's important for Indonesia.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about decentralization.
Yeah.
So for our audience, I think a lot of them have very beginner level knowledge about politics in general.
I have beginner knowledge because all I know is back in history class. Because this is what I know. Please correct me if I'm wrong. In history class, they taught us back in the day. I think it was Suharto who did the whole this decentralization thing. See, I may be wrong. He's like, Andovi, you're wrong.
You can already feel the judgment.
No, because back then we were confused. Indonesia is such a big country. Kita negara kesatuan ini mau apakah federalisme, apakah decentralization? So please do elaborate more on that.
I'm still in my early stage for my dissertation, but I mean, like, just to give a quick recap, I mean, like, about the scholarly discussion about decentralization, right? So it's basically how the central government kind of devolve authorities and or maybe like responsibility to a lower level kind of administration. Like, for instance, if you assume that like a centralized state like China, for instance, you know, it seems that the central government has this, overly centralized and powerful central government like Xi Jinping, he kind of like manage all of the things, right? But in reality, how policy operates underground is highly decentralized, because that's the only way for the central government to actually touch the grassroots, right? To devolve the authority, so in ways that the government can be functioned on the ground, right? So if you have to put like every stuff on the table, there's no way you can do all of the things. So you have to, distribute authority to certain government level. But in Indonesia, the idea of like unity, like nationalism and etc., kind of like relates to the ways in which we choose, our form of government in ways that we might choose to give a certain level of autonomy, if you have like local autonomy, autonomy daerah, to the province or even to the mayors or maybe the villages, right? And I think there's kind of like a contention between the central government and the local government. It's like an ongoing contestation that is not over yet. Sometimes the central government wants to like reverse back the authority because they feel like it's inefficient. But it's inefficient. Why should we like give all of the authorities to the local government? But at the end of the day, they don't really like take that seriously. And at the other side of the coin, these mayors sometimes feel like we need to take more authorities because we have the rights, to choose certain path for our own areas, our own society, etc. Right? There's an ongoing contestation that's happening even today on the ground. Right.
So what would you say is the primary like goal in Indonesia enacting like decentralization? Like the purpose, like the ideal purpose, right?
That's also part of the puzzle that I need to answer for my dissertation. But I mean, like, I think one of the common reasoning behind decentralization being adopted by a country is good governance, right? There's an assumption that if you want to be closer to the voters, or if you want to be closer to the public, then you need to be able to involve the local authorities or bureaucracies, like state bureaucracies. That's the term, right? To actually engage and comply with the authority, being set by the central government. But in a sense that it's not really the case in many developing countries that just simply by devolving power, then you might get good governance.
Right.
There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of like clientelism, patronage.
Exactly.
Everything that's rife at the local level as well, like political dynasty, everything, right? But if you think about this, corruption also happens at the central level.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Patronage also happens at the central level. So it's not unique at the local level. So that's something that I really want to study about. And I mean, the key puzzle for my research is actually about the variety of trajectories across policy sectors in Indonesia.
Okay.
Just a little bit about what I mean by these branches of trajectories, right? Because like the degree of local autonomy in certain area
are different to each other.
Different to each other,
Yeah.
right? Why is that the case? Because sometimes when we talk about decentralization, people assume that it's like a very homogeneous kind of like policy making, right? But in reality, in education, the degree of autonomy that you give to the local level is different. With the degree of autonomy to other sectors like healthcare, for instance. Right?
So why are some things so central government-wise? Why are some things so decentralized?
Exactly.
In different policies.
Yeah, like in forestry, for instance, right? With the palm oil industry or whatever.
Right.
So there's like a degree of freedom in terms of, the ways in which central governments willingly, reduce their authority. And one other puzzle that I think is very interesting about decentralization, which also kind of like give us a picture about politics in general, is that if we believe that politician is a self-interest actor, then you might assume that it's not possible to think that they want to, they willingly want to reduce their authority to other administration.
Right, but they did.
Right? Because if you're a self-interest person or actor, you want to retain your power. You would like to even add more power.
Right.
In your hands. But decentralization kind of goes the other way. Because in reality, sometimes people think that, or the elites at the central government might think that it's better to even reduce their authority. Right. That's the contradiction, which is very interesting at decentralization.
So it's interesting. See, before we move on, because I do want to talk about your book and why you. The thing is, I've always heard the argument because people always compare us to the United States, because the United States is like there's federal, there's states and government. But the thing is, it's such a different contextual and even historical wise, it's very different, right? Geographically, I've heard this argument before. Because Indonesia is so vast. There are different islands that, in theory, decentralization should be good. Because there's no way someone in Jakarta knows what's happening in Papua. There's no way someone in Jakarta knows what's happening in Aceh. So in theory, it's like it's supposed to be decentralized. Jakarta cannot solve the problem of Sumatra, Maluku, all that stuff. But I remember there was a time, there's this arguing online, please correct me if I'm wrong, that kita harus ikutin Amerika aja. Look at America gives states so much rights. There's this federalism. There's this federal argument because there's no way, karena Indonesia is so vast, and America, no matter how vast it is, it's still connected by land. I know it's very geographical. Indonesia's you need to fly over the sea. So, what is your opinion on the so-called argument that, you know what? Yes, it should be decentralized, but we should follow the American way so that each state gets more power. What do you think about that, Gani?
Wow, that's a very tough question, actually. Because, so, like you said, right? When we talk about decentralization and the form of governance in Indonesia, we cannot detach that discussion from the historical background happening in Indonesia, right? Because all of our founding fathers and mothers, they chose, the sense of unity instead of giving expansive kind of authority or autonomy to these islands, as you mentioned before, because the idea of federalism as a system, it kind of implies the continuation of the colonization of the Dutch.
Oh, okay. Now, okay, got it.
Because during that time, there's a contention between the Republicans or the founding fathers that choose the, Negara Kesatuan, right?
Yeah.
Instead of federal state of Indonesia.
Right, yeah.
The second option, which is the federal state of Indonesia, kind of implies, again, that we gain our independence not by force, but, given by
by the Dutch.
Queen.
Given by
the Queen.
You know what I mean?
Got it.
Because we inherited like the system.
Exactly. So it's about the ideas. It's not necessarily about the system itself.
But the idea behind it.
But the idea behind it. So that kind of like tells us about a political system or a form of governance sometimes originates not necessarily from the notion of good governance, not from some kind of like technocratic kind of like
it's very
arguments.
ideological and philosophical.
It's very ideological.
Okay.
So even then, sometimes people maybe like you, right? Why don't we kind of like, change our system to be like a federal state, like the United States of America, right? But still, that kind of ideas, self-reinforce over time. And all of the elites that still have, all of these historical kind of like thoughts about the ways in which the Dutch, the VOC or whatever, kind of like imposing their own authority towards us. It's not freedom. Because we want to maintain the idea, the Indonesian project, going on, the sense of unity and everything. That's why we have to be able to maintain the system. But
interesting.
The boundaries. So I want to kind of like draw attention to this definition about federalism and decentralization. Because in reality, the boundaries between the two is not as clear as the day. Because the things about decentralization and federalism is all about the degree of autonomy. Again, the degree of authority that the central government tends to, give to the local level. Either it's to the provinces, to the states like the US, or even to these districts level or municipalities like in Indonesia. You get what I mean? So it for me, okay, in terms of ideological debate, it's still going on. But in terms of like more kind of like technocratic kind of debate, I think the boundaries between the two is kind of blurred right now.
Okay, that's interesting.
And but before I do want to add one more about like the decentralization.
Wow.
I think
I didn't expect we would talk more about this, but okay.
Apparently we're very interested in decentralization. No, but because this topic, I think I forgot in what post, but we have touched upon decentralization a couple of times in the WIUI community. And every time we touched upon that, there's always this notion that comes up, which I think you mentioned before, right? With like local dynasties and then corruption, things like that. So for example, like the Indonesian Corruption Watch, they releases like corruption reports every year. And at the top of the actors of like corrupter, it's always like village heads, kepala desa. Not always, oftentimes. Top 3, top 5, and it's always the actors that are here due to decentralization. And there's always also the question of ineffectiveness, because when the idea is good, like you delegate power and authority, because Indonesia may be very diverse, like what you mentioned. But in reality, right, it's very inefficient. There's a lot of corruption that's happening. And even more so, some people would argue that after decentralization, corruption in Indonesia become even more rampant. Because now, like, everyone's like, do you know that meme where it's like, so this is the budget from like the very top. And then every step of the way, somebody like takes a little bit. And because of decentralization, there are more like steps. And so a lot of, I think the sentiment when we talk about decentralization is people always say that, is Indonesia even ready for that? The word ready, right? Is are we mature enough? Is our system mature enough? Are we ready to have this decentralization? Or should we enact kind of like what you said, maybe in China where it's very
Xi Jinping,
centralized?
Lee Kuan Yew,
Yeah, where
like go to Lee Kuan Yew, Xi Jinping.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's very centralized. So development can be effective, can be done very efficient and fast, and saves a lot of money too, arguably, right?
But I need to correct one of your points about China, because I did mention about the ways in which China being, I think, the largest decentralized country in the world.
Right. You did mention
right?
that. Yeah,
right. Yes.
Because again, when we talk about decentralization, we must, consider the ways in which the central government has the capacity to infiltrate the society. And as a scholars, what we need to do is to unpack the mechanisms, right? And in China, interestingly, although they have this, autocratic regime, very, centralized kind of power.
Long live the CCP. Just so that we don't get banned.
In reality, they kind of like, they're being able to actually enacting this carrot and stick kind of like, strategy to these mayors across China. So there's actually a competition across China in terms of the local bureaucracies. Because for us, maybe the incentive kind of like, it comes from the electoral incentives, right? Because we have this election.
Yeah.
But in China, the incentives comes from a career path that all of these local bureaucracies kind of strive upon.
Right.
Because the incentive that if they do well in their job as a local leaders, there will be a chance that they can be recruited to the upper level of the administration at the CCP.
I think I've heard of that. Like when you started off, you go at the outskirts of like not very popular, not a very.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That also happened to Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
Xi Jinping. He went to one of the lower states in southern China. I forgot where.
Yeah.
He did very well, and then Beijing called him up.
Yeah.
Right. So even Xi Jinping himself is what you said.
Yeah. So in terms of incentives, so we can see that even in the very autocratic regime like China, they actually, use this sense of, nudging in a sense. It's a term in public policy, right? You nudge people to create incentive so they can do better, even if they're still in part of the government. Because here in Indonesia, we always think that, public officials, they, they don't have incentives to do better, not like in the private sectors whenever there's incentives everywhere, bonuses, right? But in China, in reality, what happens in China is like there's a lot of incentives for the local administration, for the local bureaucrats.
Yeah, I think in Indonesia, there are a lot of incentives just for not the right things, right?
Maybe.
Right, yeah.
So would you say that China is able to be that way because they have a proper incentive and disincentive as a system in place?
According to the researchers that I have read, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not only DeepSeek that we need to get, but we also need to get the Chinese incentive structure in the government. That's
So this is very interesting because so I think what Gani did is he shifted because when I said a lot of people say that Indonesia is not ready, a lot of us really focuses on the people, right? On the actor, the political actor. Oh, like Indonesia's characteristics are like this. And I think that's our politics is very like actor centric. But what Gani says is that it's the system.
The system and the structure and incentives.
Yeah. And I think this relates to his your book's title, right? What a great segue.
Guys, 10 out of 10 segue.
10 out of 10 segue. So, Andovi, do you know what Ratu Adil is?
I mean, fair queen. That's the literal translation.
I don't know how you call it in English, but
I think I searched it up. I wrote it. What is it? A just ruler. So it's
I see.
A just ruler.
But I still feel like it doesn't capture because it's a very it's a term rooted in like culture and history, right? So Gani's book title is Tak Perlu Ratu Adil, roughly translated to No Need for a Just Ruler. That's a very hot take, especially if you know the context.
Context is
and especially like he published it in 2022. So
Wow.
that's
So
at the height of
at the height
somebody's
of people like, oh, where's this leader that's gonna emerge and save Indonesia?
yeah, and at the height of somebody's
Political power, yes.
presidency.
Yeah.
So can you do you want to I think you should explain a little bit about like the
Wow. Okay.
the context behind this title.
So I think I need to explain what this book about, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually a compilation of all of my op-eds, articles,
Right.
essays that I had written for at least 10 years after I graduated from my undergrad at UI. So I think the idea was initiated by a friend of mine, which is like an editor for Kompas KPG, the publisher, and he kind of like asked me, Bang Gani, why don't you like try to publish a book before you go to Toronto to do your PhD? Because like PhD is like a long kind of like trajectory, right? You will spend like 6 or 7 years not be around in Indonesia, and I feel like, okay, so, but I only have my essays. I don't have time to like write a new book.
Right.
And he said to me that it's okay. How many like articles that you have published? And I said, I don't know. How much do I need? Maybe 30 is okay.
Right.
Oh yeah, I have more than that. So, and then that's
Very productive person.
Wow.
that's the background, because I have written op-eds or articles, I think since 2016 after I graduated from UI. I always like to write and everything. So this is like a compilation of all of the op-eds, right? And I feel like I intend to use this as a time capsule, because after I, at the time that I graduated from U of T, getting my PhD, hopefully I will like, get back to this book and see all of the arguments, whether or not it still stands.
And you still believe it.
And I can feel like whether I changed a lot or whatever,
Right.
But in terms of the title, right? So I spent like a night at my mentor's house, and we discussed about this book. And there's one article about me debating my previous lecture at UI, because like during that time we have this the contestation between Pak Anies and Pak Ahok, right? And so I kind of like argue that we should not follow the populist trap whenever we always follow the figurehead of a movement rather than the ideas, right? Because I kind of like, I was born and grew up as a Jakartans, like a low middle income, from the low middle income family. And I have this bias of the middle class, right? We all have that trait. We like to, to see a contestation of ideas. We always believe that it's the good governance that we must strive for, right? But when we see the situation going on, even as early as the Obama's administration at the US, it's all about populism everywhere. It's all about the figures.
Yep.
People don't care, about policies. People don't care about the initiatives, enacted by the figure, but they only care about the figure
person.
itself, the person,
Yeah.
and how they speak, the way they present themselves and everything. So I feel like in Indonesia, we also have that kind of like,
for sure.
culture in a sense, because we tend to like see politics as the resemblance of a leadership by a figure, and I don't think that's a bad thing to have that, figure that can lead people, but sometimes people change.
Right.
And especially in politics, so I have this, I'm a fan of James Scott. James Scott is like a big names in political science, and he kind of like offers this approach to see politicians for us to divide between the front stage and the back stage of the politicians, right? What we can observe as the public is only the front stage,
Right.
all right? But what's happening behind the doors is something that matters in politics, right? And we need to be able to always, put some kind of like filter, in front of us whenever we see a politician or whatever. And I don't see that. I didn't observe that around my peers.
Yeah.
Because everyone only talk about whoever. Pak
Anies,
Jokowi,
Ahok, Jokowi.
Anies, Ahok.
Ahok.
Yeah.
All right. But it's not Ahok that we support.
It's his ideas.
It's not
supposedly.
Anies. It's supposed to be the ideas, right?
Right.
How inclusive the political system that we want to build, right? How equal the opportunity for all people in Indonesia to actually get into the system, right? That's the ideas. But it's interesting because like last month, it's just last month. So when I'm in my room, researching about the things that I want to write about, so I found this article, an op-ed written by my friend, by Ayu Utami. You know her, right?
Of course I know.
The novelist, right?
Yeah.
The big names.
Yeah.
He actually write so she wrote a reflection from a book titled Ratu Adil.
Okay.
It's written by a sociologist, I think, Indonesian sociologist. But that book is actually a historical book. So it tells about the history behind Ratu Adil. Okay.
Right.
And interestingly, in 2022, I published this book titled Tak Perlu Ratu Adil. And but you mentioned this very interesting critiques, both to the book and to my book, which is like, Mbak Ayu Utami states this. Hi, Mbak.
Hi, Mbak.
So Kak Ayu, she states that for people in Gani's generation, they have different imagination of Ratu Adil.
Right.
Maybe it doesn't matter for them to follow a figure like Ratu Adil, or even like wanting or waiting for someone to come and then solve everything.
Save everything,
Yeah.
Because they're growing in a different generation and different time. And but that's the representation of Gani. I also states that for their generation they have different take, or maybe they don't have the knowledge about Ratu Adil.
Right.
But that's a fair take about this book.
Got it. That's a fair
Right?
take.
That's a very fair take, because I think it's not about clarification, but I think the way in which Kak Ayu kind of criticized my book and the title of the book is very illuminating. Upon sometimes we detach ourselves from the history of the country.
Right.
But I don't say that it's bad, or good. It's just sometimes we need to appreciate the content of a history that has been, perpetuated over time, just to appreciate the history of the society, right? And I think this is very important because Ratu Adil, so not Ratu Adil, but how to put it, drawing from all of these social movement theories. Sorry if I'm being, academic in a sense.
No. Please,
go ahead.
So drawing from the social movements theories, there are two things that is very important to support or to help the movement to be successful. First is the unifying ideas. Every successful social movement in the world
As a unifying idea.
have unifying ideas. Either it's nationalism, whatever, ideology, whatever. And I think Ratu Adil as a unifying, ideas for the people back then, for the grassroots.
Yeah.
Right.
That was very vulnerable, right? They were vulnerable.
So I think a little context for the
The Weebus.
the Weebus who don't know Ratu Adil is kind of like a messianic figure
Yes.
Yeah.
that back in the days people are waiting for to
To save the day.
to save them, to solve all their problem, and then it is kind of extracted towards political discourse and saying a lot of our political chaos, we just need the right ruler. So it's
Exactly.
the idea of this messianic figure,
Yes.
this just ruler that
Exactly.
And to be honest, I fall into that system as well. Not I fall into that kind of thinking because I get trapped.
Right.
That's why I always say, you know what, Indonesia bakal bagus kok kalau pemimpinnya baik.
yeah, exactly.
I fall
That's a
into
bit,
that. Indonesia tuh bagus.
Yeah.
Imagine if you have a good leader.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a trap that we all fall into it, to be honest.
Exactly. Right. And that's a very important historical background of the term.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And the second important factor for social movement is actually brokerage.
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 So you broker
The brokers.
deals with one another.
Why? Because it's always hard to connect with each other, right?
Right.
Ideas cannot diffuse by itself. You need the person, you need the actors, you need the brokers to carry the ideas and infuse
right.
Got it.
to each person in the community. And
Interesting.
doing that, we can solve what we call as the collective action problem. There's always been the case in every kind of, social dynamics, politics,
right.
economics, whatever. There's always been the case that we find this problem of collective action problem. And in social movement theory, kind of like teach us about those two important factors. They need the unifying ideas because like it's hard to actually coupling all of this to overcome all of this social construction, the structural constraints that perhaps back in the day, the colonizers kind of like, infuse us with all of the things that can, it's impossible during that day to actually feel like it's okay to gain our freedom, right?
Right.
So we need those actors according to the theory.
Right.
That gives the whole.
That gives the hope.
The symbol of hope.
And doing that, I mean, like Mbak Ayu kind of like maybe unintentionally kind of remind me, in the ways in which I can actually understand and connect, these ideas of Ratu Adil to the historical background of the community and still appreciate the ways in which why people have that kind of like thinking, waiting for somebody to help them because they were vulnerable.
Right.
And it's okay. And we need the middle class,
yeah.
like your generation, our generation to actually have the different take, like what I did here, right?
But in your book, right, one of your arguments and why right now in modern democracy we no longer kind of need or we shouldn't put like our hope
Into one person.
into one person like this just leader is because now, I mean, in modern democracy we have more tools to be more objective in our judgment as opposed to like back then. But do you think, because I don't know, sometimes when I agree, I totally agree with you that going back to like even the previous conversation, right? How it's the system. It's if we have the right system, if we have the right incentive and disincentive system that appeals, that will guide the public officials and the right checks and balance, that will create a better governance, right? It's not we can't always rely on the goodness and the sincerity of individuals, because like
individuals change,
and
especially 2014.
but for us but for us to get that system, it needs to be top down. So in a way we kind of still need this Ratu Adil to enact this system first, right?
Can I offer a different take? Okay. I look at other countries to learn, right? Because it won't work correctly because different contexts. One of my favorite examples is always Singapore, because Lee Kuan Yew was their Ratu Adil, sort of.
Yeah.
But then Lee Kuan Yew made the right system.
Exactly.
There were like no corruption, civil servants get a good pay, blah, 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 blah. Do you think we missed that moment when we had our Suharto or our Sukarno? Because Sukarno it's a different context, because Sukarno had to liberate Indonesia, right? Suharto had that chance to be, I know this is very sensitive, Suharto had the chance to be there 32 years.
Yeah.
He was the Ratu Adil for many people. If he set the system correct for the rest of us, until now, it might have been a whole different story. I'm interesting. I would want to know your thought about this thing. There's no right answer. I just want to know.
Yeah. I think everyone can claim that they are
the Ratu Adil.
Okay, got it.
You can claim yourself as a Ratu Adil. You can claim yourself as a Ratu Adil, right?
Okay.
That's how politics work, right? Everyone just frame themselves as the helper,
The just
the
ruler,
promised
the
king,
new hope.
the new hope, right? Like in Star Wars and everything, right?
Like in Star Wars.
Maybe it's because I'm trained as a modern political scientist,
right?
That always have these rational thoughts, behavior science or whatever. But maybe I think it's not as easy as the notion of Ratu Adil to be transferred to the population, right? It's hard to actually educate, the populace about how should we think rationally in politics.
That's why like bottom up approach is a very long game, and some arguably is impossible. That's why sometimes people think, oh yeah, we need it to be top down. And top down meaning we need to have like the right quote
because
unquote
bottom up
leader.
is almost impossible. That's the argument.
You need to educate 200 million plus people.
Right. And one of the ways to do it is to read Makanya Mikir, a book by Abigail Limuria
That
dan
is
Kanya
so
Cita.
bad. That was a bad segue.
Okay.
Please do better.
Yeah, I'll do better. Yeah.
Thank my book sales, bro. I'm just kidding.
So again, I mean, like every leader can claim that they're Ratu Adil, right? But for me, it doesn't matter. What matters is like what they did, on what they do, and how can we, hold them accountable. Because that's actually the strength of democracy, right? Like a person like me, like you, we can actually, we have the power actually to hold the leader to be accountable for whatever reason that they chose, to enact a policy and what kind of policy that they enact, right? So I always believe that to build an institutionalization, of whatever policy making that we strive for, we always have to face the reality that for the institution to sustain over time, the one that creates the system must be able to let their hands be chained by the system that they created. Right? Because so people might get confused by creating a policy with institutionalizing the policy. It's two different things. Let me get an example or illustration. Like a lot of people in Indonesia, all of these, politicians, maybe academics, they always talk about the book written by Ashimoglu and Robinson, which is Why Nations Fail, right? It's a very popular
famous book.
I don't know why, but it's very popular.
Why Nations Fail is very
It's written by a political economist, a trained economist, actually. And I think the idea of the book is actually about institutionalization.
Right. If institutions are corrupt, then the nation
of
will
policy
fail.
making,
Yeah.
right? Bahasa Indonesianya kelembagaan, right? Institutionalization. But it's not the same as creating policy. It's two different things. Good policy doesn't necessarily mean it's being institutionalized at some point in time. You can create a policy today, but the next day people can change that. That's what happened in this country.
Right. Yep.
This particular minister, out of the blue, think about something, and then why don't we create this,
this policy? Sounds like a great idea.
And then a few hours later,
they cancel it.
They kind of like cancel it.
Yeah.
There's a policy right there on the table. But you can just remove it like easily, right? But when we talk about institutionalization of policy making, it means that that policy needs to be self-reinforced over time.
Right.
So the policy has its own agency.
Wow. Right.
To actually, force people to comply. And one of the biggest or like the most important indicator of a policy that is being institutionalized, again, is when the creator can be forced by the policy that he or she invented.
Right. It's like for a layman's term, if let's just say somebody goes like, if I do this, I get Y, but then someone's going to be like, you're going to get Y as well. You're going to get the brunt of it. Yes, I'm also going to get the brunt of it.
Yep. Yeah. Because in politics, it's very theoretical, right?
Right.
Because if you say that a policy is successful because I created that policy, it's not the policy. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
It's me.
It's you.
Again,
the power is me, not the policy.
It's actor-centric again.
Not the paper.
Yeah.
Right.
It's me. But if over time, the president changed me from my seat with other people and new person coming along, and the paper is still there, and when I get removed from the government, I can also get inflicted
Right.
by the same policy, that means
The
that
policy is working, it's self-reinforcing.
So would you say one of the example of an institutionalized policy, at least back then, is the KPK, like the
Exactly.
Corruption Eradication
Exactly.
Division?
Because then
Right.
whoever
Exactly.
did it back in 2002, whoever did KPK in 2004 or whatever the
Yeah.
year was, they can also get caught by KPK if the KPK works well. I mean,
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right?
Right.
Because there's nobody would willingly, choose to chain their own hands.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
That's actually a very interesting point.
So, in policy making, when we touch upon the notion of institutionalization, we always, imply the notion of unintended consequence for the creator. Okay? For the creator. Because that's actually the most important task of a policy.
Right.
If you want everybody to follow suit with the policy,
You should also
be the person
subject to whatever the
policy
okay.
that you created.
Makes sense.
That's, I think, very difficult in most of developing countries.
Right.
Because again,
Because you're going against your own
actor-based-
self. You're going against your own self-interest.
Exactly. An actor-based kind of policy.
We always have that,
Yes.
because most of the time I feel like public officials, when they put out policy, it's because they want to leave a legacy, like and obviously a positive legacy. They won't want like their creation to like bite back at them.
Right.
Yep.
And-
That's actually pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how do we see again now the problem stands, right? How do we get political actors to create institutionalized policy that would go against their self-interest, for example? Like that's
the golden
deadlock,
question. That's the golden because they
right?
So I think I don't have a clear answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Because like that's a kind of there's a negative side of being like a scholar, right? Sometimes you're just trying to unpack the problems.
But then the
But
solution,
then it is a solution that you leave it to
I mean,
other
criticizing
people, right?
something and coming up with a solution are two different things.
Yeah.
I agree.
But I think like policy making, I never, I don't believe that policy making follows a linear trajectory. Okay?
Okay, continue on that, please.
All right?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a common assumption, like in the public, that a good policy must follow a linear trajectory.
Okay.
Okay?
Right.
Which is like you have problems.
Right.
Okay? And then you have solution, like how to solve the problem.
Right.
And then you go into the politics.
Okay.
Right.
And then you enact the policy or you establish the policy.
Okay.
And that's it, linear, right? Everyone must assume that it goes in a linear trajectory. But again, in reality, policy making doesn't follow that kind of linear trajectory. It's very rare that we follow that kind of like linear. Although maybe normatively speaking, we always like expect them to follow this linear trajectory, right? So in public policy, the scholarship of public policy, there's been like, it's not a growing, but it's has been an establishing, there's an established thought about the ways in which policymaking is rife with ambiguity. What I mean by that is that there's certain interest group with the framing of the problem.
Right.
There's certain interest group that come up with the solution.
Right.
And they don't speak to each other. And then we have this political group with their own interests.
And they don't speak with each other. They don't know.
That means policy making, it goes to
It's so compartmentalized. It's
compartmentalized, and it kind of like follows a multiple kind of streams.
Okay.
And each streams act independently. Let me give you an example or illustration. Let's talk about green economy.
Okay. Green economy. Okay.
I'm not an expert, but I just like follow all of this theoretical framework, right? You might think that the solution is to build electrification of cars, right?
EV, yeah.
EV. You come up with a solution of what? Solar panel.
Okay. Right.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
And I come up with the solution that it's not EV. We need to create this hydrogen-based cars.
Okay.
Right.
So it's 3 different things.
right? But we are talking in a same topic in the same table, which is green economy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you talk with what's your name?
Rifki. Yeah.
And Rifki said that our problem is the air pollution.
Right.
We need more public transportation. That's the problem that he thinks about his city or like
Yeah.
the place that he lives. So each of you has your own solution, right?
Yeah.
And Rifki talked with the media, and the media kind of frame the situation the ways that Rifki perceived the problems.
Right.
All right. Maybe you didn't come with the solution because you feel like, okay, air pollution is the problem. No, maybe not. Maybe your intention was based on the interest base, like economics,
Right.
to create more manufacturing industry, you know,
Got
to
it.
elevate the
economy,
industry,
yeah,
whatever.
Right.
The green economy.
All right.
Yeah.
And then, as a politician, I come along and says, okay, what's the proposal that you can give me that I can carry into the parliament and talk about?
Right.
I don't have the interest about building electrification of cars. I don't have interest of like, you know, solving the pollution.
Yeah.
My interest like electoral incentives.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is all about ambiguity in policy making. Right?
Right.
You have different take of the problems, and the public has their own problems
Yeah. And different interests.
and different interests. And people might ask, so how can we actually, you know, establish a policy change then? So here's the thing. Sometimes in time, we need to, you know, to be able to observe the momentum. And sometimes policy making involves
policy window.
the policy window, what we call as the exogenous factor around. And we need the broker. Again, the broker
Right.
that has the capacity to talk with you, to Abi, to me,
To Rifki.
and to Rifki.
Right.
You know what, guys? Let's talk about this. But I'm not the person that comes with the agenda.
Yeah.
You have
So
the
who,
agenda.
ideally, like, according to the system, who should be this broker, like, within the system?
That I believe is the person that we must invest on or invest in.
So, like, what role? Like, is it the minister, or is it
It's
like
the president.
Yeah.
head of a political party, president?
I believe that it's the technocrats, right?
Okay.
So let me
So
put
it's
it this
actually
way.
the public officials.
You can say that it's it could be public officials, but it can also be the experts, the technocrats
Right.
that have this flexibility to move around and talk with other people.
So you
Again,
need-
to infuse the ideas,
So-
to find the common ground. Right?
So it needs to be somebody who's well connected, great
Yep.
negotiator,
Yeah.
has the right ideas.
And has the capacity to see the environment, right?
Right.
To see, to capture the room of opportunity, the window of opportunity. And that's the way, I mean, like, saying that, I mean, like, you can see why sometimes a policy comes out of the blue,
Right.
you know? You never think that, okay, where's the research? I mean, like,
Yeah.
you know, where's the whatever,
Yeah,
I mean, like, study
Yeah.
that is needed for a policy? No, sometimes or oftentimes policy just, you
Comes
know,
out of the blue.
comes out of the blue.
I want to ask a question. So you said these technocrats, these people who are, okay,
Can be technical.
can be a
Can be.
technocrat.
Yeah.
So do you have an example of a country whose technocracy goes well? Like maybe Canada. I don't know.
Who's broker?
Whose broker is
is-
good?
Yeah.
Do you have an example or?
I will give you it's not a good example in terms of like moral standpoint.
Okay, got
Okay.
it. But
But let's talk about Trumpism.
Okay.
in the United States.
Oh, I love.
Let's
Let's
go.
go.
Let's
This is
go.
gonna be another
How
hour.
about that?
I loved it. Let's go. Let's talk about it. Let's
Talk about it.
China. I want China.
People like the way we see Trump and his Trumpism is like we always see the outcome, right? The output, which is Trump winning the election. But we can also like draw a fine line, like a historical line, started from the ideation of the Federalists inside the Republican Party.
Okay.
It's a networking kind of event actually for all of these experts, you know, and like an Ivy League graduates like from Yale Law School, whatever, which have like a similar ideas about how, you know, or the direction that they need to, take the United States to. And then they were pretty small in numbers, only like a few of them.
Okay.
But they have this strong ideological stance. And then at some point in time, here comes the Tea Party, right? That has the capacity to mobilize the grassroots. Okay, so we have here the elites, you know, that coordinate themselves in their networking kind of like community, which is the Federalists, and they have the right wing kind of like party inside the party, you know, which is the Tea Party.
Tea Party, yeah.
And then we have this self-interest conglomerates, oligarchs in the United States that perhaps they don't necessarily share the same ideological stance with all of these people, but they share the same kind of interests, right? And then we have these tech bros or like the conglomerates from the whatever big tech companies,
the Elons,
that feel like they have like different interests with one another, although they're in the same industry. But they feel like there's the need of networking between them to coordinate amongst themselves, to infiltrate policy making, and to support, you know, in silence, in quiet, to support all of these politicians across states, okay? And one of the big wins for them is actually, you know, to get like, I think like more than 3 or 4 Supreme Court justices that actually has a relationship with them. And they do it slowly.
And they, to be honest, they succeeded.
And they succeeded. Okay, they succeeded. Although there's like a time when Obama and Democrats have a big win. But at some point in time, they gain their momentum. But they do it slowly, incrementally, you know? But the big win, they just wait it and then it comes along. Okay? Let's think about that kind of strategy in terms of, you know, a more democratic kind of stance. Now, most of Democrats in the United States kind of like feel like they did kind of like, they forgot the ways in which they need to nurture connections and networks, you know, in the grassroots.
Democrats lost the grassroots.
And the middle class.
Yeah, they did.
And whatever, right? And drawing from the experience of Trumpism in the United States, maybe we can just adopt that kind of like, you know, operation for every country. Like, even Indonesia, right? Which is why I believe, like Abi and Andovi, it is always important for us to always connect to each other, to share talk, you know, to infuse ideas with one another, you know, to build connections. Because like when you look into democracy or politics in general, I never see this as a short-term game, like a short game. It's not about campaign.
No.
It's not about the elections. Sometimes it's about even the between election period. Because there's the time where
it's a long game.
Policy making, you know, happens, right?
But wouldn't you argue that what happened, for example, with Trumpism in the US is what happened with the winning coalition in Indonesia recently? Also, I mean, they have massive coalitions, right? And it's also cross-sector. Business people are in that coalition, and then influencers, celebrities, and So would you say that that is an example of a well-working broker
in Indonesia's
in
case?
Indonesia?
Yeah. So here,
even though they don't do it as incrementally, arguably.
Yes.
Right?
Arguably no.
It's a very interesting and a very important topic, right? For a country like Indonesia, one of the key feature is the fragmentation of elites, right? Our elites is kind of like fragmented.
Very fragmented. If you know, you know. They're very, they have their cliques.
It's my personal take, but I don't believe that there's a single, unifying power right now in Indonesia.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
That's my take. You could agree.
I
or
agree with
disagree.
this take.
Okay. But let's take a step back and see into our history, in our own history. In Sukarno's era, it's the nationalism that unified all of the elites, right?
Right.
The history of colonization of the Dutch. Okay?
I think I know where you're going with this.
Really?
No, just go ahead. Continue.
And then when we shift from Sukarno to Suharto, I use the theory from Dan Slater. He's a political scientist studying Indonesia and Southeast Asia with a book titled Leviathan in Southeast Asia. He comes up with this notion of protection pack.
Protection pack.
Yeah. Again, the assumption is our elites are fragmented by design, by default. Okay, Indonesia is very fragmented. Okay, and the question is why? Like, how could Suharto unified all of the elites? At some point in time in our history, Dan Slater, offers this notion of protection pact to say that stability is the shared interest amongst the elites back then, because we have this very dire history, with sad history in 1960s, right? And they need to to support a unifying agenda to stabilize the situation, which is why the unifying kind of like ideas is stability.
Makanya so I thought everything was stable. Every country becomes stable.
It's all about stability.
Right.
It's all about stability, right? And economic growth.
Right.
Back then. Okay.
Which cracked in '98.
Yep.
But you're right. That was the overlying message.
Yes. Okay. So everyone must pursue stability. Okay. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. So we have the military, Golkar, the bureaucracy, and whatever. And then we move to Reformation period, where power shift from this, unifying protection pact by Suharto. So protection pact implies that, I can give you safety, but you need to support me. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
That's a pact. Like a gentleman agreement among the elites, right? Yeah. But it shifts, right? When we move to the Reformation period. Now, the question will be, what is the unifying tools means amongst the elites? And then I think that we have this political culture, not culture, but the incentive structures that always kind of like allows this compromise amongst the elites, which is our patronage system, our clientelistic kind of relationship amongst the elites, because there's no such as like there's no competition of ideas. All of these politicians behave according to the interests of maybe economic interests, or maybe like incentives to gain seats in the cabinet or whatever. And it's the unifying interests among the elites that unified them in the Reformation period. And there's a trend. That's a trend. Because even SBY, during his period, he even started this kind of like a trend to unify all of this coalition to create big government. Because it doesn't make any sense for all of the people who advocate for good governance. Because like, even in the American political science, there's kind of like a big assumption for good governance to, to encourage elites to create like minimum coalition or minimum willing coalition. But in Indonesia, no, because by distributing, by sharing power amongst the elites, it has the capacity.
That's the unifying factor.
That's the unifying factor.
So this is one of Gani's most hot take, in my opinion. So he wrote this article in the Diplomat, and I shared it in What Is Up Indonesia, and I think a lot of our audience loved it. He basically said exactly that, like the pragmatic quid pro quo political system,
the client
bagi-bagi kue is bad in its obvious reasons, but it's the secret sauce to our stability and unifying factor apparently. So would you say, this is such a hot take, would you say like the unifying factor for the elites now are corruption and clientelism, patronage?
It's buffling, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Right. Sometimes like these foreign observers, they kind of like, they're baffled by the situation of Indonesia because they expect that we will face mass, like totally mass, it's messy and there's no stability with all of this fragmented culture, whatever. But in reality, there's stability.
So the Bhinneka Tunggal, the Tunggal is corruption.
But there's stability. It even baffles me as someone who writes it, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make any sense for a country with this very, this extreme
diversity,
big coalition to actually can, survive or even to enact policies, right? But when we, it's like, the main threat for our democracy is what you call as permissiveness, right?
Yeah.
Permissiveness towards all of these clientelistic practices.
Yes.
Corruptions.
Normalizations
of everything, right? But I think I have planned to write another article about this, which is like, you say that this is the unifying or like the glue.
I didn't say that.
Okay, maybe I said that, right? But
I rephrased it.
Perhaps we should expect that this kind of strategy to be expanded over time, because now even the non-politicians can have this imagination of get involved in the policy making just by being noisy.
Okay,
that's what happened right now. I also write an article about relawan tanpa kerelaan.
I like that one too. Yeah.
So like we have all of these volunteers, like political volunteers, but they're actually not volunteers.
They're political. They have political aspirations. Yeah.
They have aspirations to get into the governing coalition, and that's bad. Because like
they want to be a part of that clientelistic patronage, quid pro quo system, culture, whatever, right?
Because now everyone wants to join.
Everyone wants to join.
And when everyone wants to join the government, theoretically, it's not possible.
Yeah, because
you can't have everybody. You just can't.
Exactly.
You cannot a nation cannot function when its unifying secret sauce is that.
Exactly. And that means it's a very important moment in time to ask the politicians that still being out of the governing coalition to think about this, right? We all know that sometimes politicians just being performative, they try to be, something like, they against something of policy, but sometimes they just like agree with them. But I think if we don't stop this kind of behavior, our government will be, too big. And then it will be inefficient.
Yeah.
There's no room for innovations because all of the state budgets must be distributed to all of these, member of the coalitions.
I agree with you 1000%.
And then I don't know, right? And that's the question that we need to ask for all of the politicians that's still outside
of the circle.
I love how you say still because they don't want to be still outside. They don't want to be still outside.
Because like if you have taste the piece
Yes.
of the pie,
Yeah.
then
You want it.
yeah, you'll
So,
also want it.
I mean, this is the last question from me because I know.
Yeah, I think,
wanna-
yeah.
What is your honest outlook from Indonesia till now to 2029? At least to 2029. Our next 5 years lah. What is your honest outlook? It can be right, it can be wrong, whatever it is.
I think we will be a more active player in the global stage. But the drivers or the motivation must be based upon our national interests or our leaders, right? Perhaps you might, listen to all of the news about Indonesia doing this, doing that.
Yep.
With
Joining BRICS.
BRICS and everything.
Yeah.
So in terms of ambiguity, before this period of presidency, all of the ambiguity happening inside of Indonesia.
Right.
But maybe in a few years later, all of this ambiguity, we kind of move it one level to the global stage. And that means uncertainty, at the pretty highest level of how we interact with the global players might be something that perhaps troubled most of the experts and observers about Indonesia. But I believe, we need to believe that we can still maintain our stability because that's what we want, right? And I feel like most of our elites have, come in the consensus that democracy, the system, with all of the drawbacks and everything, is still the best system for them to gain power, to at least stay in power.
Got it.
So I guess the last question from me, right? You said that we still need to have a unifying factor. Right now, the unifying factor is that the clientelism culture in our elites, right? What do you think is at least one of the antidote that can help us move away from that into a healthier, more functional, unifying system, you think?
At least there's one antidote.
Yeah, because I know there's
lots.
gotta be multiple.
I don't know whether it's kind of answers your question or not, but the idea of strong leader. What is
Ratu
that?
Adil.
No, not Ratu Adil, but
it's
strong
different.
leadership.
Strong leader.
Sometimes a president wants to frame himself as a strong leader, right?
Right.
But is he strong enough in reality? Because if he wants to establish himself as a strong leader, this is his right moment.
He needs to do some strong actions.
Exactly.
He needs to do some strong actions.
Because what we face, what we observe right now is still a vulnerable leadership
Right.
I
agree.
amongst the other elites.
I agree.
Okay?
I agree.
So I think let's spend a year to stabilize the situation after the election. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Perhaps he would manage to actually imposing or exerting his power among the elites. But after that, let's do the job by becoming a strong leader that we expect from him.
Yep. I agree.
Okay.
All right, let's show him the memes. Let's show him the memes.
Langsung ya.
Let's show him the memes.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Just react to these memes, okay?
yeah.
It just
So I have a couple of memes. You just react to it or give some comments, okay?
Comments. All right.
Me.
I don't understand this meme.
You seriously do not. Both of you don't
I don't
understand.
know this meme. Yeah. So I know what
Okay.
this
I
means.
don't know this meme.
I don't know this. I don't
Oh
know.
my gosh, you guys.
Oh, no. Wow.
So millennial
We're
coded.
so millennial.
No.
Okay.
I
Oh
know
my
what
gosh.
this is trying to say, but I don't know this meme.
Dear watcher, please explain. Okay, it's so fine.
okay.
Moving on. Maybe Gani will get this.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know
okay.
this guy. I know this meme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the thing that we have spoken
We've
about,
been
right?
talking about,
Yeah.
right?
I give you stability. I give you this. You give me your support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Okay, please tell me you get this.
Indonesia's.
Oh my god, I'm so bad at it.
I sort of get it because the
what?
cat is referring to how Indonesia is it his cat?
What? No. Okay.
I know.
What the cat's face? Like what?
He's indifferent.
No. No, it's like, the cat's high, bro. So like Indonesia's political cause is high.
I am so sorry. I don't get
thought
it.
this was
Oh my
like
gosh.
referring to like Bobby Kertanegara. That I was going
Oh my
there.
god,
Oh my
no.
gosh. I'm
We're
so
so
sorry.
we're so focused on. He's so cute, Bobby is so cute. That's I thought that no. Okay.
Okay,
So he's a high cat, guys. Okay.
last one.
Last one.
Okay. Oh, this is
It's a Mexican standoff, sort of. Give me my money, so I'll stop going to rich business.
This is actually another interesting topic about political party and
Right. But we
like
didn't touch on
their
that.
financing, say, right? Yeah.
I think we at CSIS have been like,
Right.
not all of us, but some of us have been advocating for a higher
Allocation,
budget.
political budget, right?
For political parties.
Yeah, this is another hot topic.
Yeah, it is. It's a hot topic.
And we should talk about that later because like that's a very important take.
Yep.
Maybe like
But
one
maybe
of the solutions.
can you give like the 1 to 2 minute exposition about like this topic?
If you want to create competition inside the party, then we need to be able to infuse more budget or more power for an alternative candidates or like alternative leadership in the party, because now the money is kind of concentrated, among a few people in a party. So I mean, like again, if there's no competition in the party, then it's hard for us to actually expand the access for many people to get into the party, right?
Yep.
So I mean, like that's one solution that we can come up with, but if you talk about this solution with all of these NGOs and activists, there's a lot of pushbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of
Right?
corruption.
Because when you talk about budget and parties,
Yeah,
the
if you
notion is that, oh my god,
giving
more
more-
corruption.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like,
I get it.
understandable.
Understandable. The pushback is very understandable, but I also understand this point of view. I completely understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, so, as simply, like, do you know rekamjejak.net?
Yeah.
The website?
Yeah. The one that's
right.
Yeah.
If you just go there, you can see like all the track records of like political actors that are, a lot of them are associated with political party also.
Yeah.
That commit like corruption.
Because sometimes we forget that political party is like organization, like useful organization that you need money
to run.
operate, to run.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe we can use that budget to just like fund all of this day-to-day basis kind of like expenses, like to for the rent.
Right.
I mean, like for the administrative stuff and whatever.
Mahal, gedung di Menteng mahal.
Exactly, right?
Yeah,
gedung-gedung.
yeah.
Look at all of those buildings.
Iya,
Oh my
itu
god.
mahal di Menteng itu gedung-gedung mahal semua tuh.
Yep. Yeah, because like people want political party to stop like associating themselves with businesses and like conglomerates, but then they don't. What's the alternative, right?
There's no alternative.
Like created out of thin air. No, like you can't do that.
Yeah.
So this is another like tricky situation that we have ourselves. All right. Well,
Wow.
Gani, thank you so much.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Where can people follow you online on Instagram or anything? So you shout out your IG,
Just my name, Edbert Gani.
Edbert Gani.
What's your-
I'll follow you after this. Please,
Sure, thank
please
you.
follow me back. No,
Right away.
that's fine.
What's your favorite anime?
Yeah.
One Piece?
Bro, you are
Of course.
Of course, duh. Because the world government in one piece. Okay, no. Let's not go there.
It inspires me a lot in where I write
I know. I think
all
you
of my
credit.
articles.
There's like a credit for One Piece here somewhere.
Yeah.
I think I
Damn,
remember
love
reading
it.
it.
I love
Yeah.
it. Have you read the new shop? Okay, never mind. That's not- okay.
Yeah. Spoiler.
That's fine.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye,
See you.
Weeboos. Bye, Weeboos.